They arrive as shadows in the night, crashing down with overwhelming force against those foolish enough to incur their wrath. When they arrive, it is upon metal beasts meant to sow destruction and leave no resistance in their wake. They operate in the darkness, low to the ground, moving fast, hitting hard, and disappearing without a trace. They are called the Night Stalkers, and if you need a gang of high-level operators with a helicopter, they are the ones that you call. Across 4 decades of American modern warfare, the Night Stalkers have served as the United States' premier helicopter warfare element. Riding the best motorcraft that Pentagon money can buy, they've been a mainstay of special op combat operations in every major and minor conflict that the US has seen in many years. Whether it's Delta Force, the Navy SEALs, the Army Rangers, or anyone else in the back of the chopper, it's the Night Stalkers behind the stick, spreading their motto to every enemy who dares invite a visit: death waits in the dark.
Wars around the world have dominated the headlines for a long time now, and they often bring out the most heated and polarizing perspectives. And the news we read, the news we miss, heavily influences our outlook on these types of issues. And that's why I'm partnering with Ground News for the video today. They're an app and a website that gather related news articles from around the world to create an in-depth story overview on any topic. Every story comes with a quick visual breakdown of the political bias, ownership, and headlines of the sources reporting, all backed up by ratings from 3 independent monitoring organizations. For example, while the European Union recognizes Israel's right to defend itself, Israel is being urged to end its Rafah offensive in Gaza immediately. I can quickly read a summary of this based on nearly 80 news articles Ground News found reporting on it, and see that most of the coverage is coming from the right, and sources span the entire world from the US to Australia. Over to the left, you can compare how each source is reporting on this topic. US-based Al Monitor is reporting, for example, Israel's Prime Minister doesn't believe there's a humanitarian crisis despite thousands fleeing from Rafah, while the Hindustan Times, coming out of India, points out that Israel's growing tension with the EU can actually impact its economy, as the EU is Israel's biggest trading partner. War is already complicated without the bias, and a lack of context can confuse us even more, making Ground News unlike any other news platform. And I know I can trust them for balanced information since they're independent and non-partisan, and they stay as objective as possible. So join the news platform you can trust too. Go to ground.news/wargraphics or scan the QR code on the screen now to save 40% on their Vantage plan. That's the one I use for unlimited access to all of their amazing features. And now back to today's video.
In today's American military, the Night Stalkers go by an official name, the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment Airborne, or 160th SAW A. But when the unit that would evolve into the Night Stalkers first came together, they went by a different name, Task Force 158, cobbled together within America's arsenal at a time of desperate need. The year was 1980, and America's commander-in-chief at that time was one Jimmy Carter, who had a pretty major problem, or to be specific, 52 individual problems that happened to unify into a big problem. Those were the 52 American diplomats and other US citizens being held hostage at that time by the recently founded Islamic Republic of Iran, who had just taken over a nation that had previously been regarded as among America's most dependable allies in the region. Now, those 52 citizens had become bargaining chips, and Carter had just failed spectacularly at trying to bring them home. The attempt had been called Operation Eagle Claw, a joint effort by the newly formed Delta Force, the US Army Rangers, and the Special Activities Division of the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, plus the combined resources of the Army, Navy, and Marine Corps. If it had gone to plan, it would have seen a combination of helicopters and C-130 transport aircraft rendezvous on a salt flat, transfer a whole lot of very talented special operators onto those helicopters, infiltrate the mountains outside of the Iranian capital of Tehran, and raid the city in order to rescue the Americans held hostage inside. Then, those troops and hostages, with the aid of the CIA team operating out of Iran, would fly out of a Tehran stadium to an airport 60 miles out, which Army Rangers would capture and secure in order to fly them home. Unfortunately, just about none of that operation went according to plan, and by the time it was aborted, 8 servicemen would be dead and several aircraft would be damaged or lost without ever having even approached Tehran or made meaningful contact with Iranian forces. The after effects of Operation Eagle Claw cascaded far and wide across the American military, but it also pointed out a glaring issue with the way that the military's flight capabilities worked. Well-trained, well-equipped Army helicopter pilots, the sort who were vital to making special operations missions happen, were hard to come by, and often the people chosen to go on a certain mission were chosen because of things like rank or availability, without much thought to whether or not they were capable of operating in a very specific mission environment. America needed a reliable pool of helicopter pilots who could keep up with special operations forces, carry out their missions expertly, and potentially even take part in a successor operation to succeed where Operation Eagle Claw had failed. Now, that second try at rescue would ultimately never happen, but a unit was cobbled together anyway. Dubbed Task Force 158, it took some of the best pilots from across the Army's 101st Aviation Group, particularly ones who could fly the Sikorsky UH-60 Black Hawk. That particular helicopter would become a mainstay of the Night Stalkers for decades, and it's still among the aircraft that they operate today. They'd also get access to several dozen Chinook helicopters, heavy lifters that can weather a good deal of damage and keep on flying. Finally, they'd get access to a hidden inventory of OH-6 Cayuse aircraft, small two-seater helicopters that had been squirreled away in a holding area called the SHOC Pad on Fort Campbell, Kentucky, where the Night Stalkers are still headquartered today. By the time their first batch of aviators completed their advanced training, learning to master things like stealthy flying, night flying, flying fast at low altitudes, and dealing with adverse or unexpected weather conditions, they had already become the US Army's foremost aviators, as well as designated night fighters. The aircraft they used could pack a whole lot of weaponry, they had the capacity to transport and guard over small units of elite special operators, and they were versatile enough to serve in a wide range of mission roles. Barely more than a year after the task force was designated, it was splintered off to its own unit, the 160th Aviation Battalion, and after a couple of name changes, it became the 160th SAW. The unit's stated core mission is rather straightforward. According to the website for US Army Special Operations Command, the Night Stalkers exist to, quote, organize, equip, train, resource, and employ Army Special Operations aviation forces worldwide. In practice, so far as we can tell, the bulk of their work falls into one of three main categories: insertion extraction, combat search and rescue, and attack. First, insertion extraction. You take a team of special operators, you fly them to precisely where they need to go, often on very short notice and with minimal or no planning, and get them to a target and back safely. This often involves pilots having to fly deep into enemy territory, hug the landscape even at night to avoid detection, attack enemy targets if necessary, and survive, often still in the air, until their fellow special operators are ready for pickup. In their combat search and rescue role, the Night Stalkers are charged with flying through the heat of battle in order to get to wounded or trapped ground forces, potentially breaking through an entrenched enemy position, or even trying to get the job done while actively being shot at. Then, in their attack role, they're capable of providing close air support to ground troops while carrying out combat operations, often alongside small units of special operators. When you hear reference in military fiction to calling in the cavalry, well, for the US, the Night Stalkers tend to be that cavalry. When it comes to their kit, there's no firearm, headset, explosive device, or tool that could ever rival their most important piece of hardware, the helicopter. Officially, the Night Stalkers operate three choppers: the Boeing CH-47 Chinook, the Sikorsky UH-60 Black Hawk, and the McDonnell Douglas MH-6, with just under 200 helicopters in total designated for the unit's use. When it comes to the Chinook, the Night Stalkers primarily use a variant called the MH-47G. That's a special operations-ready version of the aircraft that integrates sophisticated avionics, increased fuel capacity, in-flight refueling capability, a fast-stroke propelling system, and terrain avoidance radar that enables the aircraft to fly at low altitudes while hugging the ground. Capable of flight at a top speed of 196 miles an hour, 315 kilometers an hour, with a 460-mile range and a service ceiling at 20,000 feet, the Chinook is the US Army's premier heavy-lift helicopter. Inside, it can carry a complement of up to 55 troops, and it can carry payloads of up to 24,000 pounds or nearly 11,000 kilograms. The Night Stalkers versions get a bit of extra weaponry too, including 2 onboard miniguns and 2 onboard machine guns. The Chinook is capable of inserting large contingents of special operators into a wide variety of mission sets, as well as recovering important cargo from contested or enemy territory, and taking a good deal of small arms fire while trying to perform search and rescue. The Black Hawk is just as important in the Night Stalker's arsenal. Specifically, the MH-60L and M variants are designed for special operators. The L variant integrates specialized radars, color display weather mapping, auxiliary fuel, and a laser designator, as well as the potential on some choppers to receive in-flight refueling. The M variant is even more impressive, with advanced glass cockpits and sensors, high-power high-powered engines and terrain-following radar. Special Ops Black Hawks can either serve as gunships laying down covering fire or assault craft carrying small teams of special operators into the fray. The Black Hawk tops out at 183 miles per hour, nearly 300 kilometers per hour. It's got a combat range of 370 miles, and it can carry 2 copies of either a machine gun, a minigun, or a rotary heavy machine gun, along with 4 hardpoints carrying up to 76 rockets, 16 air-to-ground missiles, 8 air-to-air missiles, or several additional gun pods, depending on which flavor of your day the Night Stalkers have chosen for the occasion. When carrying troops on board alongside its crew of 4, the Black Hawk can transport up to 11 seated special operators, or if it needs to transport cargo, it can carry some 3,200 pounds on the inside or 9,000 pounds on the outside. Finally, the US is known to have at least experimented with stealth versions of the Black Hawk, which the Night Stalkers are known to have operated, but more on that shortly. And rounding out the Night Stalker arsenal is the Little Bird, specifically the AH-6 and MH-6 light attack aircraft. The Little Bird can serve as a miniature command post or electronic warfare aircraft. It can carry up to 6 operators sitting on the sides with equipment to fast rope down to the ground. It can operate in a stealthy role, although not meeting the criteria to be considered a proper stealth aircraft, and it carries all the onboard hardware that a Night Stalker would be used to finding on the Chinook and the Black Hawk, albeit in a smaller, stripped-down package. Boasting a top speed of 175 miles per hour, 282 kilometers per hour, and a range of about 270 miles, the Little Bird can carry miniguns, heavy machine guns, Hellfire or Stinger missiles, or rocket pods. Now, alongside its 3 known helicopters, the Night Stalkers also utilize the General Atomics-made MQ-1 Predator drone, capable of flight at a top speed of 192 miles per hour, 310 kilometers per hour, and capable of carrying up to 4 air-to-ground or 8 air-to-air missiles. Their 200-ish aerial death machines are shared among an estimated 2,700 soldiers across 4 designated battalions and a regimental headquarters company. The headquarters and the 1st and 2nd Battalions operate out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky, while the 3rd Battalion operates out of Hunter Army Airfield in Savannah, Georgia, and the 4th Battalion operates out of Joint Base Lewis McChord outside of Tacoma, Washington. 1st Battalion gets to work with the light assault Little Bird helicopters, 2nd Battalion gets the Predator drone, and all battalions share access to the Chinook and the Black Hawk, with 1st Battalion granted the special honor of playing with the Black Hawk's gunship version. Becoming one of the Night Stalkers is no easy task. The organization doesn't recruit from either the Air Force or the Navy, but exclusively among Army aviators, and there's no direct path to get there after signing on the dotted line in a recruiter's office. In order to even be considered, a soldier must already be trained in a relevant discipline, be able to qualify for a high security clearance, and be financially stable so as to eliminate points of leverage by which a soldier could be compromised by a bad actor. For enlisted troops, you've got to score highly on the Army assessments, meet the criteria to become an airborne operator, and informally, you've got to be deemed ready to get the opportunity to try out. Officers must hold the designation of pilot in command. They've got to have 1,000 hours behind the stick of a rotary wing aircraft, including 100 with night vision goggles, and they've got to be able to get an even higher security clearance than enlisted troops. Once a soldier is selected, they'll travel to Green Platoon, a 6-week training and orientation course that assesses whether or not a prospective applicant is ready to receive the meat of the Night Stalkers training regimen. During Green Platoon, recruits go through all the physical tests you'd expect: pull-ups, road marches, runs, rope climbs, that sort of thing. They'll be trained on the weapons the Night Stalkers use and fire thousands of rounds over the course of their combat qualifications. They'll be assessed in their skills as first responders, their abilities in land navigation, their ability to work with their colleagues. In the Night Stalkers, only officers actually fly aircraft. Those who are enlisted will be in a support role. As such, enlisted personnel will train for about 5 weeks to assess readiness to perform the tasks that wouldn't require them to sit behind the stick. For officers, the process is far more extensive, lasting anywhere between 20 and 28 weeks depending on the aircraft they'll learn to fly. In that role, they won't just learn the normal skills that come with helicopter piloting, they'll be trained as nighttime pilots, familiarized with the advanced gear at the Night Stalker's disposal, and trained to fly low and fast in a wide variety of mission roles and environments, be it in the mountains, over the desert, over cities, or over open water. In Green Platoon, roughly 70% of officers won't make it through, while for their enlisted counterparts, attrition is about 40%. But just getting past Green Platoon is no guarantee that an officer will become a Night Stalker. When an officer qualifies as a BMQ pilot, that's basic mission qualified, they're signing up for 3 years of specialized training in order to fit FMQ status, that's fully mission qualified. They're also likely to attend SEER during that time, that's Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape, a training program meant to harden soldiers to to torture and interrogation in the event that they may be captured. They can also train as flight medics, where the medics of the Night Stalkers are known to be exceptionally elite compared to their peers. From there, it'll be a minimum of 3 years until they're able to try out to be a flight lead on Night Stalker operations, with the typical wait period being closer to 5 years. As for what the Night Stalkers are looking for in their prospective recruits, among their highest priorities are identifying those with the capacity to be relentless in their work. Because the Night Stalkers are responsible for infiltration and exfiltration, not just on their own behalf, but with several elite special operators on board, this is a group with an exceptionally low tolerance for those who might do anything less than the maximum possible to achieve their goals. If a Night Stalker fails to get a team to their target, they'll be leaving dangerous adversaries to fight another day, and if a Night Stalker accepts any circumstance in which they may leave a team behind on the ground, then they simply are not suitable for the job. Alongside that utter relentlessness are the indicators that the Night Stalkers would be right to place their trust in a recruit, and that a recruit has the discretion, the integrity, and the prudence to be able to be in the loop for some of the most sensitive covert operations that the US military can carry out. As the group itself counts upon its most important mottos, Night Stalkers don't quit. When they formed in the wake of Operation Eagle Claw, the Night Stalkers entered an American military culture embittered by withdrawal from Vietnam and still firmly entrenched in a Cold War posture, staring across oceans at the Soviet Union. The Night Stalkers would get their first taste of combat in 1983 during Operation Urgent Fury, a successful invasion of the small Caribbean island nation of Grenada. According to Night Stalker sources speaking on that moment in time, the operation was not expected to be a difficult one. Grenada offered little in the way of meaningful resistance, and their job was to clear out any resistance from one particular airfield, insert special operators at one particular prison, one radio broadcasting station, and at the governor's mansion, and wait around to see if anything else was needed. 9 Blackhawks and 8 Little Birds took part, with the Blackhawks carrying special operators who would use a new technique called fast roping to get down to their targets. Contrary to expectations, though, the aircraft faced fierce resistance, with the ones attacking the island's prison being forced to turn back under heavy incoming fire from small arms. 1 Blackhawk crashed, killing a Night Stalker co-pilot, and 3 soldiers had been inside. 4 helicopters worth of Night Stalkers and special operators sustained injuries, struggling back to the aircraft carrier that they'd been launched from. Other Night Stalkers missions during Urgent Fury did a bit better, backed up by heavy aerial gunships and taking no casualties. Unfortunately, the Night Stalkers had been sent into a situation where, according to their leaders within the US Army, they were led to believe they'd face almost no real opposition. Instead, they were the ones cursed with informing the rest of America that actually Grenada didn't particularly want to be invaded. Across the 1980s, the Night Stalkers would have a good deal more success after they'd found their footing. During 1987 and 1988, they took part in Operation Earnest Will, a protection operation to keep tankers hailing from Kuwait safe during the Iran-Iraq War. During that time, they became America's first helicopter pilots to use night vision and infrared goggles in nighttime combat. They took a leading role in Operation Just Cause in Panama, sustaining losses of 2 Night Stalkers and 2 helicopter airframes while clearing the way for other US forces to come in and assert themselves in a much larger way. They'd also pull off one particularly daring operation in June 1988 when a Soviet Mi-25 Hind attack helicopter was identified abandoned in Chad by its Libyan operators. For the US to get its hands on that helicopter would have been a major victory, and it was one that the Night Stalkers proved capable of attaining. 2 Chinooks would fly nearly 500 miles into Chad under the cover of darkness, navigating without aids or assistance, sling-loading the helicopter under one of the Chinooks and flying it out of the war zone through a sandstorm back to a friendly Chadian airbase where the Mi-25 could be loaded alongside the Chinook into a single C-5 Galaxy aircraft and brought back to the US. The 1990s would be a busy time for the Night Stalkers. During Operation Desert Storm in 1991 that helped form the tip of the spear in Kuwait, ensuring on-the-ground refueling capabilities for American attack aircraft, inserting special operators to hunt for Iranian missile launchers, and joining the hunt via Black Hawk gunships, aiding in recon and extraction with surveillance units, and performing combat search and rescue to get downed airmen out of dangerous areas. 2 years later, they'd fly in the Battle of Mogadishu, where 2 Night Stalker Blackhawks were shot down in battle in an event that would later be adapted to literature and film retellings in the form of Black Hawk Down. Out of 18 American troops killed during the Battle of Mogadishu, 5 were Night Stalkers. In the wake of the September 11 attacks in 2001, the Night Stalkers would take part in early operations in Afghanistan, including one mission that saw 2 Chinook helicopters break the world record for duration of a rotorcraft flight. They'd fly for 11 hours, accepting 3 refuels in the process in zero visibility conditions over the Hindu Kush Mountains, while inserting a team of 24 Green Berets and 4 Air Force combat controllers to collaborate with the CIA and the anti-Taliban forces known as the Northern Alliance. Night Stalkers would be critical in taking supplies to dangerous areas, as Delta Force, CIA, and British Special Boat Service operators engaged in the hunt for Osama bin Laden in a cave complex called Tora Bora. Around that same time, the Night Stalkers were active in the Philippines, hunting down terrorists and taking part in one particular operation that killed a terrorist leader named Abu Sayyaba, although while in the Philippines, one Night Stalker Chinook crashed and killed 10 service members aboard. Then, when it came time to invade Iraq in 2003, the Night Stalkers played a leading role, clearing the way for a larger occupation force in their wake. They were tasked with carrying out the first strike of Operation Iraqi Freedom, using their Little Birds and Black Hawk gunships alongside Air Force 8 and Warthog aircraft to destroy more than 70 sites that would otherwise have warned Iraq of the coming invasion. At the same time, Night Stalkers brought special operators into the areas where they'd start carrying out raids and sabotage operations, and took part in an attack called Objective Beaver, a raid on a location that was suspected to host chemical and biological weapons. Around that same time, they'd helped US Army Rangers seize the Haditha Dam, averting a crisis that could have compromised Iraq's electrical grid and killed many people downstream. Days later, they'd helped rescue Private First Class Jessica Lynch, and a day after that, they'd rescue a squadron from Delta Force as they were pinned down by Iraqi forces. When Saddam Hussein was captured in December of that year, he'd be exfiltrated on a Night Stalker Little Bird. As America settled into its wartime posture, the Night Stalkers would find a comfortable rhythm, carrying their fellow soldiers in and out of their covert operations and at times taking part themselves. During the war against the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, it became relatively common for Night Stalkers in their Little Birds to run out of ammunition in their onboard guns, but then carry on the fight using their personal rifles, pistols, and grenades in the 21st Century Aviators version of combat on horseback. When the Night Stalkers did take part in direct combat operations, the helicopters generally proved to be far too much for their insurgent enemies to deal with. But they'd also experienced significant losses over the course of the Afghanistan conflict. In 2005, 8 Night Stalkers and 8 Navy SEALs would be killed aboard a Chinook as they attempted to locate a missing Navy SEAL named Marcus Luttrell. For the Night Stalkers of the early 2010s, their proudest moment would come in May of 2011, when Night Stalkers flew 2 specially modified stealth Black Hawks into Abbottabad in Pakistan to eliminate Osama bin Laden. One of 2 Black Hawks would crash during the operation, with all souls on board recovered alive, yet despite the crash, the insertion and exfiltration was a success. The Night Stalkers aboard were able to cover the Navy SEALs who carried out the assassination and escaped together with the team on their single surviving chopper. This, too, would be a Night Stalker exploit that found its way to the big screen in the form of the film Zero Dark 30. The following years would see the group be instrumental in hostage rescue operations in Yemen against an Al-Qaeda affiliate, in Syria and Iraq against the Islamic State, and in Afghanistan against not just the Taliban, but local bandits as well. In the last few years, the Night Stalkers operations have been kept secret, as is the standard for special operators not just in the US Army, but across specialized units the world over. They're known to have participated in the raid that claimed the life of Islamic State leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi in Syria, and they've likely participated in operations like the United States' withdrawal from Afghanistan and coalition operations against Yemen's Houthi rebels in and around the Red Sea. Unfortunately, though, the unit often makes news for different reasons. Because of the highly complex nature of operating and training in rotorcraft for fast-moving, low-altitude operations, the Night Stalkers have the unfortunate distinction of suffering a relatively high rate of training accidents. At the same time, their members have been awarded dozens of medals and distinctions over the last couple of years, largely for operations where details on what they did are either hazy or just completely unknown. The truth of their successes in the field, as they happen in real time, are likely to be kept within a closed circle for quite a while, and the triumphs and the bold feats of the Night Stalkers today will likely remain unknown to us for a very long time. To learn about them, you'd likely have to become one of them, and that is a feat that few could ever hope to achieve.